I was standing 3 steps away from my mother's casket when I realized someone in that room was betraying me. The chapel smelled like lilies and old wood, a mix of sweetness and decay that clung to the back of my throat. Rain tapped against the stained glass windows, turning the light into shifting stripes of grey and blue. People whispered my name, my mother's name, God's name. None of it sounded real. My hands shook as I tightened my grip on the crumpled eulogy in my pocket. I was supposed to walk up, stand in front of everyone, and say something beautiful about the woman who had spent her whole life cleaning up the messes other people made. Instead, my eyes were stuck on the far corner of the room, where my fiancé, Daniel, was standing too close to my cousin Emily. Too close. It wasn't the kind of closeness you expect at a funeral, born of shared grief and desperate comfort. It was the kind that exists in stolen hotel rooms and back seats, and late-night calls you're too tired to explain. Emily's hand brushed his arm, and his shoulders relaxed in a way they never did around me. Not anymore. She laughed at something he whispered, a soft, quick laugh that didn't belong in a room with a coffin. My heart didn't break. It went numb. The priest called my name, inviting me to speak. The room turned toward me, waiting. I forced my feet to move down the aisle, each step ringing in my head like a gavel. I could feel their eyes on me, the poor daughter, the strong one, the one who held the family together. If they'd glanced just a few feet to the right, they would have seen that everything was already falling apart. I reached the lectern and unfolded the paper with my mother's favorite stories written in trembling ink. For a moment, I almost played along. Almost pretended I hadn't seen Daniel and Emily leaning into each other as if my mother's death were just background noise. My mother, I began, voice tight, believed in loyalty. The word caught in my mouth like a fishbone. Behind the crowd, in that same corner, I saw Daniel's hand at the small of Emily's back, a slow, familiar gesture. I swallowed. She believed, I continued, that the worst kind of betrayal isn't what people do behind your back. It's what they do while looking you in the eye. Daniel froze. Emily's smile vanished. Our gazes met across the room. In that second I knew. They both knew that I knew. The paper in my hand suddenly didn't matter. The words about my mother's kindness and sacrifices faded. What came out instead was something raw, unscripted, honest, in a way that terrified me. My mother deserved better than secrets, I said. Better than lies dressed up as love. Better than people who show up when there's something to gain and disappear when there's a price to pay. No one understood exactly what I meant yet. But Daniel did. Emily did. The color drained from both of their faces. When I finished, I stepped away from the lectern and walked down the aisle in silence. No one stopped me. Grief has a way of letting people do strange things without questioning them. I slipped out through a side door, my heartbeat roaring in my ears. The hallway outside was empty. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. My legs felt hollow, like they might give out at any second. I leaned against the wall, squeezing my eyes shut. It could still be nothing, I told myself. A coincidence. An innocent touch. A laugh between family. Then I heard their voices. "She'll be fine. We just need to get through today," Emily whispered. "Are you serious?" Daniel hissed back. "She's not stupid, Em. Did you see the way she looked at us?" "She's grieving," Emily replied. "She'll blame herself before she blames us. She always does." Something inside me snapped back into focus. I moved silently down the hallway, following their whispers to a door half open at the end. It led to a small storage room, cluttered with flower stands and extra chairs. I saw Daniel first, his back turned, running a hand through his hair the way he did when he was cornered. Emily stood close to him, too close, fingers lightly touching his wrist. "I can't keep pretending," Daniel murmured. "Not after this." "You don't have to pretend," she said softly. "Once the will is read, Everything changes. You know that. The will. My mother's will. My stomach lurched. I stepped into the doorway. What exactly changes? Both of them jumped as if I'd fired a gun. Lily, Daniel started. Don't, I said. If you lie to me in a storage room at my mother's funeral, I swear I will drag the truth out into the chapel. Emily tried to recover first, eyes widening just enough to look wounded. We were just talking, she said. This isn't... Careful, I cut in. This is your one chance to decide how bad this gets. Daniel looked at me then, really looked, and I saw it. The guilt, the panic, the calculation. The man I thought I knew was already rearranging the board, searching for the safest move. How long? I asked. How long have you two been... just talking? Silence. My jaw clenched. I took another step into the room, closing the door behind me with a soft click. Was it before my mother got sick? I asked. Or did you wait until after I started sleeping in hospital chairs and forgetting to eat? Was that when it became convenient? Daniel's shoulders sagged. Lily, it wasn't like that. Then how was it? He opened and closed his mouth, then glanced at Emily as if hoping she'd speak for him. For once, she didn't. She just watched me carefully, like someone studying where the cracks would appear in a sheet of glass. It started a few months ago, Daniel finally said. After you pulled away. I laughed once, sharp and humorless. Pulled away? I was taking my mother to chemo, not a spa retreat. You weren't there for me, he snapped, and there it was, the ugly truth. You were always at the hospital, or exhausted, or angry. You needed my cousin? I asked quietly. At my mother's funeral. This is your story? Emily flinched. You weren't the only one grieving, Lily. That's funny, I said, because from where I'm standing, it looks like you were rehearsing an entirely different kind of loss. For a moment, no one spoke. The humming lights, the faint sounds of the service continuing down the hall, it all pressed in on us. I could storm back into the chapel, scream, point, drag them both into the center of the room, and let the whole family tear them apart. I pictured it, chairs scraping, my aunt gasping, someone shouting, "Not today, not here!" Someone else whispering, "I always knew something was off." The scandal would become bigger than my mother's memory. She would hate that. My mother had spent her life absorbing other people's mistakes, turning public disasters into private consequences. She used to say, if you want real justice, you don't perform it, you prepare it. I took a slow breath. Fine, I said. This is what's going to happen. Emily stiffened. Daniel frowned. Lily, don't... You're going to walk back in there, I continued, and you're going to act like nothing happened. You're going to hug my relatives, accept their sympathy, and stand beside me while we bury the woman you both used as cover. That's not fair, Emily muttered. Fair? I repeated. You're talking to the daughter who watched her mother fade away while you two were busy playing tragedy behind my back. Daniel stepped forward. What are you going to do? I met his eyes. I'm going to let you wonder. Confusion flickered across his face. You want to know whether I'll tell them today? I asked. Tomorrow? Next week? You want to know if there's proof? If I'll show them messages, recordings, the way you look at each other when you think no one is watching? Good. Wonder. Lose sleep. Jump every time your phone buzzes. Lily, I'm not doing this for you, I interrupted. I'm doing it for her. They didn't need clarification. We all knew who her was. I pulled my phone from my pocket and, without breaking eye contact, tapped the screen to stop the voice recording that had been running since the moment I stepped into the room. Emily's face drained of color. You recorded every word, I said. You gave me more in 5 minutes than I suspected in 5 months. Daniel's voice dropped. You wouldn't use that. I tilted my head. You cheated on me with my cousin while my mother was dying and discussed her will in the same breath as your affair. You sure you want to bet on what I wouldn't do? For a moment, fear finally replaced arrogance in his eyes, but I still didn't storm out. Not yet. I'm not going to ruin her funeral, I said softly. I won't let her last act on this earth be reduced to a circus because you two can't keep your hands off each other. They relaxed just a fraction. It was a mistake. However, I added, after today this doesn't belong to you anymore. It belongs to me. To you? Emily asked. To me, I repeated. I decide who knows. I decide when. I decide how loud the truth gets. And I promise you, it will be loud enough. I slipped past them and opened the door. Before stepping out, I turned back one last time. Smile out there, I said. People are watching. Then I walked away. Back in the chapel, the atmosphere had shifted in ways only I could feel. The air was heavier. The flowers looked sharper, their stems like tiny spears. Daniel took his place by my side, careful not to touch me. Emily lingered near the back, suddenly much quieter. As people lined up to offer condolences, my aunt whispered, "You poor thing, you look exhausted." I almost laughed. If only she knew. By the time we reached the graveside, the clouds had finally broken. The rain stopped, leaving the world damp and shining. As they lowered my mother's casket, I felt something inside me lower too. Not just grief, but the version of myself who would swallow anything to keep the peace. When it was my turn, I stepped forward, clutching a single white rose. I stared down at the coffin and spoke in my head, words I couldn't say out loud. They betrayed me at your funeral, Mom. But I didn't make a scene. I made a promise. That night, after the last guest left and the last dish was washed, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop and my mother's paperwork spread out in front of me. The house felt too quiet. Daniel had texted 3 times. I hadn't answered. I opened my email and attached the audio file of their conversation to a draft addressed to myself, to my lawyer, and to a folder labeled simply, "For later." Then I opened another file, my mother's will. There it was, the clause she'd mentioned once, offhand as if it were nothing. A condition that allowed the executor, that was me, to reassess beneficiaries in the event of fraud, exploitation or concealment of harm against the direct heir. I read it twice, 3 times. You see, my mother didn't trust pretty faces and easy words. She trusted patterns. She trusted paper. She trusted me. The next day, I didn't confront Daniel with screaming. I invited him to coffee. He arrived looking restless, hopeful, maybe even relieved, like a man stepping into a conversation he believed he could spin in his favor. He sat. I slid my phone across the table and pressed play. His own voice filled the space between us. Once the will is read, everything changes. He went pale. "Lily," he whispered, "we can fix this." "We?" I repeated. "You broke it. I'm just deciding what happens to the pieces." By the end of the week, he wasn't my fiancé anymore. By the end of the month, Emily wasn't in the will. I didn't post the recording online. I didn't send it to every relative. I didn't need to. Truth doesn't always require an audience. Sometimes it only requires consequences. Standing at my mother's grave a month later, I placed a fresh bouquet down and took a slow breath. "I didn't explode," I told her softly. "I didn't turn your funeral into a show, but I didn't let them walk away clean either." The wind stirred, carrying the faint scent of earth and flowers. "I caught the betrayal at your funeral," I said. "What I did next wasn't loud. It was permanent." And then I turned and walked back to a life that hurt in new ways. But at least, for the first time in a long time, that life was built on something my mother always said we could live with: the whole, undeniable truth.